In this episode of The Bear Wars, Dan chats with Brandon Spano, the CEO of ALLCITY Network. ALLCITY is a content-focused sports media company that provides in-depth coverage, podcasts, and videos focused on professional and collegiate sports teams in 5 cities across the U.S. Denver, Phoenix, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Dallas. They also have physical bar locations in each of these cities, which offer a hub for passionate local sports fans. Join us as we explore ALLCITY's growth and fundraising in an ever-changing media landscape. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
Brandon, welcome.
Thanks for having me, man.
You know, my team's all nervous because you are an expert at the podcasting business.
Hey, well, the set looks good and everything's dialed in. I think you have a bigger team than our shows have. So yeah, you're on the right track.
Great. A little bit of mic problems that you helped correct. That was nice.
Yeah, I knew exactly what this situation was as soon as they walked in. We started with these exact things. Then we moved them to connected to these little tables that have bags underneath. It was a whole thing. But yes. Yep. These are great. Sure mics. These are good. This is great.
Good.
You did a good job. This is a good setup. It looks great on camera too.
Yeah.
Whoever built your set did a good job.
Yeah. We had one on the road that we did at Mayor Johnson's office, which was really cool too, because it was his main office with all the cool stuff in the background. But this has turned out to be a good set as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and we're going to start with the here and the now. And then we'll come back to how you got to where you are.
Totally.
I just saw a recent announcement, I think in the last week or so, that you're on streaming services. So tell us what you're all about. What is ALLCITY all about? You know, how do you reach your customers? Who are your customers? What are you doing?
Yeah. So think of it like this. Right now in every city, the core pillars of sports, right? Not the auxiliary kind of connections that fans can have, but really kind of the core, engagement for sports is sports talk radio and regional sports networks that carry the games, right? And that's where you get your pre and post game shows and stuff like that. And these are 2 functions of sports media that are scaling down or going bankrupt or going away, right? So Odyssey, which 36 months ago opened the year with $1 billion market cap, they filed bankruptcy, right? Here in Denver.
And
right?
Odyssey's business was?
It's sports talk radio. They're still open. They moving some things around, right? You look at Bally's Sports, right? Another one that's kind of going away. They filed bankruptcy actually in Phoenix, where we have a sports network. Bally's completely went away. Dallas, where we just launched, Bally's went completely away.
And what was Bally's?
Regional sports network. So they had game rights. So they had the games, right?
So local games. And
right.
by games, you're talking about the main teams.
Yeah, the main teams, right? Exactly, the main teams. And most importantly for our business is the pre and post game shows, right? The content around the game. We like to say we want to own 21 hours a day, right? Everything outside of the game itself. And then, so if you look at Denver even, right, to keep it in our home court here, Altitude has had distribution issues, right? I mean, over 80% of the Denver Metro couldn't watch the Nuggets and Avalanche in the last 4 years. They both won championships during that time, right?
Yeah, it was crazy.
So AT&T Sportsnet, the Rockies RSN, they went out of business, right? Their sales director is our sales director now, right? So you kind of have this these
changing the guard.
These pillars are moving, and there's nothing there to replace them. But to kind of keep it business, this is a business podcast. The brands that are advertising in the marketplace, they still want to put that capital to work with sports fans. They still want to get in front of sports fans, right?
And by brands, you're talking local businesses, local
or
operations,
national.
National businesses.
It could be the local. It could be the Toyota Denver buy. It could be a local dealership in Denver, right? Yeah. But wherever the dollars are focused inside of that city. And so, for us, what we've done, and this actually is
and they're wanting to reach a very specific customer demographic. And who is your customer demographic that advertisers may want to read? What's your typical?
Yeah, we're, going to be 25 to 40, primarily male sports fan, affluent, digital savvy, watching smart TVs, reading content, stuff like that.
So these are diehard
And diehard sports fans, absolutely.
Diehard sports fans. I love my local teams.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to watch the games when the games are on, but I also want to get other content associated with my favorite teams.
Totally. Yeah, and I say affluent, and they're not saying that like anybody can watch, anybody can engage, and they absolutely do, especially on YouTube where we have a younger audience. But generally speaking, I think that we're slowly starting to move into now the folks who were primarily using sports talk radio or broadcast television. That's all they had as smart TVs. I used to say that podcast and Spotify and Apple Music and these things, they weren't going to disrupt radio. Technology was, right? The more cars that are digitally connected than not, right? As that percentage increases, that's what's going to disrupt radio because of optionality. That's what we're seeing with television now, right? The more homes that have smart TVs, the more homes that are digitally connected, the more options people have. And that goes back to your question originally, which was we just launched on FAST channels, which is FAST is free ad-supported television. On just a flurry of platforms. So, Denver is on Comcast and Xumo and Samsung Plus, and Philly and Chicago are on those, as well as the Roku channel. And, Phoenix is on Samsung Plus as well. So, we're kind of connecting the dots market to market as much as we can, getting these out everywhere. So wherever you're at and whatever you're doing, you can watch our content. But to kind of circle back, because I don't think I've still answered the question, I kind of set up.
Well, let's bring it to life a little bit. And I'm from Chicago, as you know. I love the Chicago sports teams, love the Denver ones too. But Chicago Bears, we're in the middle of the season right now, and they have had some really tough, frustrating losses.
Good young quarterback.
Good young quarterback, but some just crazy games where couple things have gone differently and they'd be in a playoff hunt. Instead, we're looking at our draft picks. So I watched the game, and then I want to hear people talk about the Bears. I want them to rant, and I want them to rave, and I want there to be emotion. What do I do sitting here in Denver if I want to hear the aftermath of the Chicago Bears game?
If you want to hear or watch it, right after the game, we have our CHGO Bears podcast, and that's part of our model. In every city that we're in, we do a show every day for every team. And that's part of the model. And it's all.
So in Chicago, that would be what teams?
It'd be Bears, White Sox, Cubs, Bulls, Blackhawks.
And White Sox are still a team in Chicago?
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to talk about that. I'm glad we don't have the financials open on that, because you'd probably be busting my balls a little bit. But
I'm a Cubs fan.
Yeah. So, right after the Bears game, actually the biggest show we have in the entire company is CHGO Bears. It's a massive show. They do an incredible job, and they go live right after. And then right after that is Lance Briggs and Alex Brown, Briggs and Brown. They have a show right after them too, a couple of Bears legends. And so, that's, if you were in Denver, for example, you could go to allchgo.com, you could go to CHGO Sports YouTube, you could go to your smart TV and go to the Roku channel, or go to Samsung Plus and find the CHGO channel and watch it live right there.
Yeah. And I envision a lot of your user base are people who maybe work with their hands, work outside, or are in a car, in a truck, and they're looking to just have something to listen to.
Historically, they haven't been actually. We had a tough time kind of breaking through that wall. But as time has gone on now, and as these kind of traditional networks have pushed people more towards digital, we are now starting to see that. And we're actually seeing an increase in that age above 40 starting to adopt our products more. So that does, at first, when we first, rolled this out in 2021 was probably our first live video all day, every day. It was really a particular fan base that was on YouTube or on Twitter and, listened to podcasts, and it was very segmented. And now we're seeing that expand.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about how you started the business, why you started what you did beforehand. But I want to stay on what it is. So make sure everyone who's listening to this, if they haven't already gone on to your website or Spotify and looked up DNVR, that they will. But let's talk a little bit more about what the business is and why it is. So back to the Chicago example, I'm here in Denver. easy for me to kind of see content about my favorite sports teams, both in Chicago and Denver. And you mentioned CHGO. What is the Denver brand?
Yeah, DNVR was the first network. It started as BSN Denver. BSN stood for the Brandon Spano Network. Not a great name. Not a great name. And the idea here, and I'll just kind of take you through the story. The idea was that, at the time, SB Nation was really dominating page views. They had these blogs that were fan blogs, and they had social media accounts that matched the blog, and they were team specific. And so every team had their own blog. And these blogs were managed by sports fans, diehard sports fans. They had no access, no credentials. A lot of them young kids that were living in different states, displaced. And they were aggregating content they found online, and then they would write about it or write their opinions. And then there was a big interactive comment section, and then the social feeds kind of grew. And essentially, what they really did that was smart is they built their own CMS on the back end, and it was very, very SEO friendly, and they dominated search results. And Google recognized them as a category leader for every team. And so these guys were beating newspapers when you would Google a team's name. And at the time, if you remember in 2015, you couldn't even open denverpost.com or Chicago Sun-Times with all the videos. And it was the banner ad that was 2015, 2016 was kind of like the clip, the peak of banner ads, where they were just out of control. And at the time I was in media here in Denver, I was kind of a solopreneur media agency. I had inventory and products on different channels and stations across the market. I haven't
heard that term before, solopreneur.
Yeah.
Is that a term you made up?
No, it's a real solopreneur.
Solopreneur.
Yeah. It's like it's an entrepreneur without a team.
Okay.
So and I wanted to add digital, and I thought, we should start I should create a blog. I created BSN Denver, and I'm going to cover the teams. And I bet I can get, with my relationships with the teams, I could get.
And why did you have relationships with the teams?
Credentials. Well, I had just been in media so long, and sports media so long, right? Yep. Whether it was radio or television or whatnot. So I knew the PR guys and women. And so, we stood this up. We brought 6 guys into a room. We said, this is what it's going to be, and I won't take you through all the particulars, but that deal changed many times over the years. And at first it was just a blog, and we had the sites, and, we had the social accounts, and it was BSN Avalanche, BSN Broncos, whatever. And so by the end of 2016, we said, hey, let's get into podcast. And here's the thing is that I had all of these brands that were advertising on these other, products and spots and
you had all these brands, meaning you were repping the brands.
I was like an ad agency essentially. Yeah. Right. So I would buy commercial. I would buy, like, one time I bought the Gary Kubiak show inventory for the rerun on Sunday mornings, right? Before Fox NFL Sunday. And I would go out and sell all that, right? So I'm a media sales guy kind of by trade. We had Sunday Night Sports Zone or 104.3 The Fan weekend show, Mile High Sports Daily Show, whatever. And so, my thinking was, well, I have all these local brands. If I create a big podcast network, I can move them over to my own platform. And I don't have to pay for my own spots, right? I'm paying for those spots. And so it kind of picked up. It was team specific, which in 2016, team specific podcast was actually, being done by credentialed reporters, was pretty innovative. That's not something that was done. And here's the other thing is that in 2016, it's not like, because you're thinking like, well, how hard can it be to start a podcast? Well, right now, there's a million places. If you just Google how to start a podcast, well, you can order a kit, and you can, Megaphone will say, hey, hook up to here, and we'll distribute it out far and wide for it. That didn't exist. None of that existed. So we had to find an engineer to build in the hosting service on our back end. We had to find a third-party host who could connect. So their engineers and our engineer had to connect everything. So our podcast distribution platform was our website. You can imagine what the storage looked like a couple of years later on that, right? And so as we started getting through the year, we started getting so many replies, and fans started saying, I'd rather listen to this than sports talk radio, because it was on demand. You could choose your topic, right? And at that time, I think that everything we did was based on search, right? The whole reason why we were category specific so much was based on that original kind of build out saying we need to be search friendly. Now, search is kind of by the wayside. The algorithm feeds you what you like, right? But it didn't used to be like that. And so, we had all of these different shows. They were and then based on that feedback from the users, I said, let's go daily. So early 2017, we got a $125,000 SBA loan. Might as well have been a $125 million SBA loan. And we got a little office in Lakewood, this old insurance office. And we built a studio in there. And I gave everybody these mobile podcast kits. And I said, hey, wake up in the morning, do a podcast, then go over to the team, cover the team, write your stories, whatever. But this is what we do every day. We do a podcast every day. Which was great. This was all their dream job anyway, so no problem, right? So we start doing daily shows for every team, and that's it really started to grow. By the end of 2017, we're still writing, but banner ads at this point are just not effective. The market washed them away, and unless you had a really, really big audience. And so The Athletic was, we had thought about this already, but The Athletic had already kind of, I think there were 5 or 6 markets in on subscription. And they had some success. And I said, hey, there was also
The Athletic tells who
The Athletic was sports written, essentially the new newspaper for sports. It was a subscription only. It's still around. Good friend of mine, Alex Hansman, Adam sold it for, they sold it for $550 million to the New York Times. Adam Hansman, rather.
For the first time, Dan Caruso pulls back the curtain in his book Bandwidth, a memoir that celebrates the pioneers who invented the internet's early backbones, the renegades who lit the fiber revolution, the antics that caused the biggest market crash of all time, and the new wave of entrepreneurs who led the industry back from its ashes. Though it seemed to happen in the blink of an eye, the Bandwidth adventure was a multi-decade roller coaster ride involving larger-than-life successes and devastating failures. The unbridled ambition of newly minted billionaires and high-profile tycoons created extraordinary value, unprecedented value destruction, and endless opportunities for a brave few. This reflects tech's past, present, and future, and is a story you won't soon forget. It will help you prosper during today's AI tech bubble. The book is available for pre-order at dan-caruso.com/bandwidthbook and released in early 2025.
Anyway, so they had success. There were some independent blogs that were having success on subscription. And this is before Substack. And we thought, hey, let's go to subscription, right? Because everything at that time was, how to stay alive. This isn't working. How do you go next? So we went to subscription. That was really powerful. We launched that in December of 2017. And we found out within 90 days kind of who our base was, as far as like the people that will pay to support it. And there was like 2,500 people, I want to say, that paid. And this was new for us. We had email addresses. We were doing parties. We started being able to identify who these people were, what they liked.
And doing party, what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, at first it wasn't much. It was just like, it was like, hey, let's do a member meetup at a bar or something like that. It eventually turned into watch parties where we'd come watch games together. So we get into 2018 and we're selling subscriptions. We've got this podcast, still no video, very, hit or miss video. And we've got kind of podcasts rolling. We've got one video product called Daily Sports Report that's going every day. Ali Monroy, who's our VP of media operations now.
And at that point, was it still people coming to your website to get your content, or
it was
it was
either coming to the website or podcasts like Apple Music or Apple Podcast or not. I don't know if Spotify. I don't think Spotify had podcasts yet. Mm-hmm. Apple Podcasts was the big one. Whatever podcast servers, we were on all the podcast stuff. So listening and reading, and then the subscription stuff, of course. And then about halfway through the year, I said, hey, let's launch merch. And I met Eric Weedham, and he was like, hey, he was a brand guy, and he was working on he had just got done with the NBA All-Star game, and he was doing the Pepsi summer campaign. And he's like, let me get through with these. And I thought, there's no way we'll get this guy. And he was a huge Denver sports fan. And sure enough, he called me back. We went and had lunch, and he said, okay, well, I'll do merch for you, but only if we do it on premium fabrics and this. And then he had all these rules, and I want to make a quick buck, but the more I was listening to him, it made sense. And he's like, hey, you got to do this right. You have one chance. I said, okay, you know what? Let's do it right. This sounds right, because, I don't want to be one of these guys. And that was a huge moment for the company, I think, because Eric came in. And the first thing he told me was that day, he said, you don't have a brand. I said, what do you mean? BSN Denver? He's like, that's not a brand. That's the name of your company. It's not a brand. We'll get into that later. And so he started creating merch.
And we're 2018.
2018. Yeah.
Okay.
And we are, so one of the first shirts that we launch is the head of Philip Lindsay without his kind of face. He has eye black. It's like using his face without using his likeness. It's kind of like trying to get away with that. His big fro, and then he had his bandana on that he always had, and it said BSN in the middle of it. And it started selling like crazy. I get a C&D from his attorney saying, hey, you can't do this. So I call him up. I said, hey, we're a small little startup here. Let's work a deal. We get a deal, we'll do a rev share with him. A couple of weeks later, it's Thursday night football, and we're all watching, and Broncos are on, and it's like, warming up on the sidelines, rookie of the year, runner up right now, Philip Lindsay, and he's getting ready, and he's wearing our shirt on national television. Huge moment, right? We immediately do a push campaign, and we're selling, it's still our most sold shirt ever. We've been selling shirts now for 6 years, 7 years, however long. So 6 years. So, so merch starts going, and then we really start taking, at this point now we've got, if you think about it, we have team-specific podcasts. We have team-specific email lists. We have team-specific. We have the emails of people that are buying merchandise that are team-specific. So we have these direct marketing funnels. And so we said, well, let's start doing watch parties, real watch parties for the games. And so we started doing Avalanche and Nuggets. And these watch parties, we would just pack bars around Denver with these. Drag our merch everywhere. It was kind of like a traveling rock band. And so by the time we came into 19, we had all this stuff rolling, and revenue was doubling or sometimes tripling year over year. That really kind of early stage, growth. And, at that time we said, okay, let's rebrand. And so we went back and forth to a bunch of stuff, and we wanted something. At this point, I felt like we have something that could scale. I felt like we had it all together. We didn't have it all together, but just note for whoever thinks they have it all together, you never have it all together. But we thought, hey, we could scale this. And so, we decided to do, Ryan Konigsberg, my co-founder, came up with DNVR, and that's the call letters of the, Eric said, those are the call letters of the city. And we said, wow, that's really powerful. That's good. And that's kind of a jab at radio too.
Yes.
And
every city has call letters with four letters, right?
Yep, that's right. And so we said DNVR. Wow, that's great. And it's even if you just, it sounds like Denver.
Yeah, DNVR.
Okay, great. Let's do so. Denver. So we make a couple of big hires. Adam Mares is one of them, who comes in and kind of is one of the guys who revitalizes the whole video moment. We get into 2020, and
something happened.
We get into 2020, and actually, listen to this. 2020 starts out exciting because at the time, little pub company, which at the time owned 24 bars in the metro, we're doing a lot of events at their bars. Mark Berzins, who is the founder, comes up to me and says, hey, we have coffee one morning. He says, hey, why don't we do a bar together? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I have this thing. It's called Colfax Sports and Brew. It's not doing very much revenue. It used to be a soccer bar. And we turned it into this. It's, but it's not working. You guys could, there's a mezzanine. You guys could build your studio in. We could do a glass wall. He had this whole, I said, man, this sounds amazing. So I called the guys, Eric and Adam and Ryan. There was kind of four guys who used to make all the decisions together, and said, hey, what do you think? Everyone was thrilled about it. We got to go in, and Eric designed the whole bar internally. And, we were able to remodel it and kind of make it our own, at least the first kind of crack at it. It's since been completely revamped. But so here we are, March 2020. We have daily podcasts. We've got a big merchandise business for us. We've got a membership group of about 5,000. We've got our own bar, right? We've got this new brand. We're the hottest thing around in Denver, we feel like. And
at that point, you're still just in Denver too.
Yeah,
right?
we're just in Denver. And we feel like, hey, like we're going to like, you know, this is going to be a huge success. Oh yeah, that's right. So the bar's grand opening was March 13th, Friday the 13th, March 13th. That week starts, and COVID is kind of a thing that's out there. If you guys remember, COVID was like, it was like a big deal, but it wasn't.
Not quite then, but right around then.
It was. And even that week was like, hey, this thing might get serious. But even that week, it wasn't that serious.
No, because we couldn't put it in perspective. I mean, you always hear these.
That's right.
You know, all this new virus is out there, and it's going to come, and it's good. This is a bad one. It's like hearing about a storm is going to come, and you live in an area that hasn't really had storms, but you've had warnings to them, and it's never had. You're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
because we were raising a ton of money to close the Zale deal at the time. So right about that time is when I went on a road show that included
that
US
was a good
and Europe.
time to raise money too.
It was a great time to raise debt, and it wasn't hard to raise debt, but we met with people from all over the world. There were people from Asia, there were people from Middle East. We were in Europe, we were here, and it was right about that time, and then came back. And for me, I spent the next 10 days in a bed trying to recover from what I learned to be COVID.
Wow. So yeah, for us, it was really, I was doing press hits on Monday and doing interviews, and we were getting all the press involved. And I think it was that Wednesday was when Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz coughed into the microphone, made that joke, and they cleared out the stage. What
was the joke when he...
there was something, he was making light of COVID, after at an NBA press conference.
Yeah.
There was something said about, and he like coughed on a mic purposely to like kind of show like, what are we talking? Like, had no idea the consequences of that, of course. And who
was it? Who did
it was
that?
Rudy Gobert.
He
was the center for the Utah Jazz at the time. And that was either before or after they had evacuated the stadium because of COVID concerns. During a game, that's when we knew, okay, this thing is real, right? Yeah. Sports were canceled on Thursday. We put out a release on social media that said, hey, we're going to open on Friday. It's not going to be the grand opening, because we still didn't understand either, right? It's not going to be the grand opening. It's just an opening. If you feel comfortable coming, come on down. Of course, a lot of people came. And we kind of opened that night, and that was the opening of our bar. By Monday, the city, it was closed, right? The city over the weekend closed the whole city. And the thing wouldn't get opened again for a couple months later. And that was when we had the riots downtown. We were open again for another 3 or 4 days before they had to close it.
Wow.
And so we were closed for a couple weeks after that, or however long it was, until the riots cleared out. And then the bubble playoffs came, and that was when they had the playoffs, NBA and NHL, in these bubbles. And if you remember baseball games with no fans in the stands, all pictures of people and stuff, such a weird time. That was when the bar kind of opened up. I think it was quarter capacity, something like that. And, people started being in there. But what's interesting about this time, Dan, is that while there was no sports, our fans had nothing to do, and they were used to engaging with us every day. And so we decided, hey, we're going to go live on YouTube every day, right? We're going to record these podcasts, but they're going to be live on YouTube every day. And we got good at that live streaming. And by the time that the bubble playoffs came for these, we had already been going live every day. Now our post-game shows were going live from the bar afterwards with a producer on set. And that really became the model. And it all happened because of that whole COVID situation and that engagement with the user that we found to be so impactful. People were sending super chats to get their, paying to essentially get their comment read and put on the screen. And by the time we got out of 2020, we were essentially running like a local TV station out of the bar. And so, as we came into 2022, what was amazing is during that time, my wife, Lindsay, she was our sales director at DNVR then, really incredible salesperson. She had, we instantly, I think within 24 hours, we had 18 sponsors had to pause in Denver. At that time, we had a whole, long list of small paying local clients. And anything that was brick and mortar was done. And so she went out, she got us an online education deal with MSU, and she got us this big DraftKings deal, and really was incredible. We got through that entire time without one single layoff. As a company, is essentially a bootstrapped company that hadn't raised sufficient capital, or I should say an abundance of capital. And so,
well, at that point in 2020, was there any outside money other than
there was a small? I had probably raised a total of $250, something like that, of friends and family. And those were like, that wasn't like like someone's dad, right? That was like $1,010,000 checks, and so by the time we got into 2022, you have DraftKings working.
You kind of skipped 2021.
Oh, I'm sorry, 21. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
By the time we get into 21, we are one of the highest converters in the country for DraftKings on a percentage basis. And our shows are growing. I think it was about 207%.
Let's take a little bit of a segue. Tell us about DraftKings and online betting, sports betting. Tell us how that intersected what you were doing. Where did that come from? When did that really get legalized and pop onto the scene? And how did that help?
Well, like any success story, we had to get lucky. And Denver was legalizing sports betting that summer that COVID came. And COVID didn't stop it from getting legalized, and it didn't stop DraftKings from advertising. They knew sports would come back at some point. I think at the time, the bets were like based off of like ping pong and, whatever the different things were. And so we took a big ad deal at the time.
When you said the bets was like ping pong games?
Yeah. I mean, anything there was, pool, anything that could still be, that was like still going on, DraftKings was doing bets on, and you could bet on. And the whole thing was about sign up, right? And getting people signed up. And then by the time sports came on, it obviously hit. But they did that first deal. I want to say, just my guess, it was about $500,000 deal, which was a huge deal for us at the time.
Where was Denver in the legalizing sports betting? Were they toward the beginning of that, toward the end?
Well, I think I would say, we're in the middle now, probably. So I would say Denver was towards the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe the first third.
So a lot of states haven't done it yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Especially, if you talk about it based on market size, like, you don't have Florida, California, Texas. Those are
3 huge markets.
Yeah. That's whatever that makes up of the country. And so, coming into the year, we had about $500,000 DraftKings deal, which was huge for us at the time. And we were converting at a really high level. And coming into that summer, I knew like I was getting antsy. We had to scale. We had to do something. So we had an offer from Techstars to join, and we could go to Techstars Sports. We could go to Indianapolis. That's a great team over there. Really love those guys. And they would help us scale. Our first market would be Indy. DraftKings was trying to, at the time, we were talking about a potential acquisition. It was pretty deep in the process. They had given us an offer. Or we could try to just, go where we, kind of continue on our own, which at the time I didn't think was an option. It's funny how everything works out, because I've actually never told this story publicly. We accept the Techstars invite. And I get approval from my wife to go live in Indianapolis for the next 90 days, the whole thing. And then almost immediately, DraftKings comes with this offer, which at the time I owned 60% of the business. It would have been a big one. Comparably speaking, if we do what we think we're going to do now, my opportunity is much bigger, of course. But at the time, and I had a lot of really good, people around me and saying, "Hey, like this is the kind of thing you probably want to take." And,
take some chips off the table.
Yeah. And so during that time, though, in the middle of it, they hired so the guy who was working our deal on M&A, still a good friend of mine, he has a baby and he goes on paternity leave, which he's still going to work through it or whatever, but there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And they hired a new content guy. The board says, we need a content guy. We're going to build content inside of, and that changes everything. And so I had already called Techstars and said no after I said yes, which I felt terrible about forever because I know how that program works and how hard that is to get into the whole thing. And they had made they had actually, without getting into details, they had kind of maneuvered stuff around for me and I was way late on the answer. They did and so like I kind of owe those guys forever for that, but ended up having to go and say, I'm sorry that you did all this for me. We're not going to do that. And then this DK deal, because the new content guy comes in, he's no longer there. Didn't last long.
Everyone thinks producing content is easy.
Yeah. That deal falls through and there could have been something to be done. But I think in the middle, as that deal got tough, what we realized is we are in the middle of this deal. And in the middle of the process, they're telling us, get ready for Phoenix. Phoenix is going to be your first, as soon as we buy this, and you might have to open it even before the deal's done because they're going live. Sports betting is being legalized on whatever date it was, September, whatever. So we have to be live and ready by then. So we had been working on Phoenix. And I think at some point we realized, hey, whether they buy us or not, they're going to buy the Phoenix inventory. They're going to buy a big ad deal in Phoenix and get exclusivity on that platform, just like they've done in Denver. So if we can get our costs down, why don't we use that money to scale? We'll have two markets. The number one thing I had heard when trying to raise money the whole time was that, you need to scale. We like it, but you need to scale. We like it, but you need to show you can open other markets. So we said, you know what? Fine, guys. No deal, DraftKings. Let's go and open Phoenix. We opened Phoenix.
Under what call letters?
PHNX. Phoenix. And we did an ad deal with them. And we brought on other ads and, it was actually a pretty slow kind of open. It's a much smaller sports market than we anticipated, from a engagement and interest standpoint. But
we'll come back to that because the profile, which makes a market very strong for you, you learned the attributes over time. So we'll come back. Why maybe Phoenix, if it was for the gambling angle, maybe wouldn't have been the ideal second market.
Sometimes, I was actually telling Adam Hansman this actually the other day. We were talking about it. He's helping me a lot with ALLCITY, as he had already been through all of this with the Athletic. And I was saying, sometimes as a CEO, you don't get to make the right decision. You don't get to make the best decision. You just don't get to. Our decision was Phoenix. Was Phoenix the best second market? No, that was what I got. And if we were going to scale and I was going to do it and not wait forever to, then it was going to be Phoenix, and that was the chance. So we had to make that work. And we had to take the gamble on that and try to do it the best we could. We did. We pulled it off. Right. So during the opening of Phoenix, I had opened a seed round. We were going to just raise $1 million to help support the launch of that market. And, I think at that time, once people saw the DraftKings deal come in for Phoenix and it opened and there was a successful launch, it looked like DNVR except a desert version. People said, oh, okay, like this is real. These guys can do this. And there's kind of this scalable kind of node aspect that is unlocked with sportsbook money and audience. And so, we ended up raising $2.8 million instead of $1 million. I wish I would have known earlier. I would have had a higher valuation. But we raised $2.8 million, and Matchstick led that round. Our friend Natty Zola, and we essentially had enough of a surplus there where Chicago was about to go live a digital sports betting. Sports betting was actually legal there, but you couldn't do it online unless you drove to a casino a couple hours away and signed up in person. So, so it still hadn't scaled. And so we said, let's do Chicago in March. And what's funny about this is at the time, no kidding, I literally thought we can scale this company off of sportsbook revenue and audience growth. Like, we don't even have to, like, we could do whatever that's it, And if you think of 2022, we launched CHGO in March of 2022. We launched Phoenix in September of 2021. If you think of capital at that time, I think March of 2022, we started hearing the footsteps of a potential, collapse of the stock market and stuff. But around that time, the capital was flowing, right? And so, man, I just thought
a lot of people who were the beneficiaries of capital flowing thought that's how it always would be. They never experienced anything else.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, you and lots of others. You put out a term sheet and people give you money, and you have structures that were favorable to the company or the past investors. Didn't matter. Money would come in, and but that was about the time that things started to shift a bit.
Yeah, I remember. We got to our first valuation. It was just a 10x of annual revenue. And I remember one investor asking me well, so how did you get to this? It was a 10x of annual revenue. He said, well, what about this and this and this? And it's like, hey, listen, it's 10x annual. Right? Everyone else.
That was probably me asking those questions.
No. You had came in the next round, but the other people had already invested. So it was like, hey, leave me alone, guy. Kind of. Now I think back at it, oh my God, yeah. But so we end up getting Chicago open, and within 60 days, it was within 6 months. The banks, we had the SVB situation, the stock market. It was the whole, and the sports book we decided to go with actually closed. They were going up for sale, and because we didn't go with DraftKings in this third market, we wanted to diversify. We didn't want DraftKings to own everything. We ended up back with DraftKings for the end of that deal, but that was a rocky year because we were actually showing significant growth in that year. I think we went from 1.6 to 3.8 or something like it. It was good growth early that year for us, but the spend was higher than what it should have been, and the capital was hard to access after that. It's kind of
you were back. You were and still are an entrepreneur, but you were a entrepreneur for the first time in the context of raising money from institutional investors, wanting to do land and grab, get to this market, get to that market, and we'll figure out how to pay for everything, when we need to. But in the meantime, we got to do this, we got to do that. And that's how entrepreneurs often work.
Yeah. And you know what? You have to have a little bit of that. But you also have to, and we're seeing that right now where we're actually reallocating funds from one area. We're growing business side. We know we're spending a little too much on this side. We have to move some things around. And so we're a lot more, we have a whole in-house finance team now. It's a little different, but you get smarter as time goes on. But
you have to have, most businesses have to have some near-death experiences in order to really survive. I don't think that's talked about enough.
Well, it's not. And I remember on one of our board calls, you were like, hey, if you keep spending like this 8 months from now, you're whatever. And you were like, the best founders plan ahead. And I was thinking at the time, like, hey, listen, we don't have time for this. Right. Yeah. But now what are we doing right now at this moment? We are actually planning for 8-9 months ahead right now. Right. We're trying to say, okay, where's this position should be? Should we get this? Should we do this? How do we set this up? What's the 20%? What's the model look like if we're below plan? And you got it at this size that we are now, you have to be. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We were a lot of, because
there were a couple of times where you were wondering if there was going to be more money to spend with bills to be paid and what to do.
Totally. Yeah. That was kind of like that for a while because we had pushed so hard. and it was really important to win the markets with the talent. And, it was really important to not kind of erode we still to this day have never done an actual, like layoffs, which is actually probably the only media company I can think of that hasn't. But yeah, so by the time we went back to raise capital at the end of 2022 to do a Series A, and we said, hey, we're going to stand up a SAFE. We don't have an institutional to lead the A, but we have enough, kind of scale here and some growth to show that we can do this. So, Natty was once again, our friend Natty was nice enough to kind of have a term sheet written by.
And just Natty's as Brandon says, a good friend of ours. Natty is with Matchstick Ventures. He's here in Boulder. Matchstick is centered in Colorado and Minnesota. And he's former Techstars, focuses on early stage companies, typically in kind of geographies. Colorado's a heavy portion of where they invest in, but it's really in outside the coast is where they focus, called the middle of the country. And we've done a couple things with him, including he brought us into ALLCITY at about this time, and so we became direct investors. We're also a small LP of his as well, so we're an indirect investor, I suspect. Yeah. In addition to our direct investment.
Yeah, and this was the time we met, so it was into 2022, we were going to do an A. It starts with a SAFE, and then see if we could find an institutional to kind of lead at some point. And Natty was nice enough to write up a term sheet for us, put the first money in on the SAFE, give us a price, which, I think was impactful at the time. I know that, there's a lot of, I see the SAFEs I think SAFEs are being used more than ever before now, but
I think they've dried up a lot now.
Yeah. Well,
at that point in time, they were being used a lot, but
I haven't. Well, yeah, you would know better than me. Yeah. It seemed like at the time, and you're right. We just did a Series B that was term sheet, but so maybe they're not being used as much.
No, and when there are SAFEs, there's not what's the standard SAFE? Yep, let's sign that and move on. It's like, I want this. I want this. Might as well be a price deal, anyways.
So that was big to get a fund to actually write the SAFE and price it. And so then when we went to market with the SAFE, someone said, who priced this? Matchstick Ventures. Do you have money in? Matchstick is leading this. Yes. So that was really helpful. And so, we had enough traction at that point. We had a real business, I think people could see.
At that point, were you still in the 3 markets?
Yep. That was 3 markets. Yep. And we were looking to launch one in 23. We were kind of going into 23 saying that we want to launch one in 23. And so, you guys came in, some others came in. And then about mid 23, the Nuggets won the NBA championship. Yeah. And we were like the center of the world at that point.
Scripps Avalanche had just won the year prior.
They won the year prior. But this Nuggets thing was huge because we had the number 1 Nuggets show. We had the number 1 Nuggets report. We had the number 1 Nuggets everything. Our merch was selling out of control. The Nuggets wanted to have our merch in the stadium. If you went in the stadium, our merch was everywhere. And the Scripps Howard, who writes the am I getting the name wrong? Whoever writes the actual championship books that go out to all gas stations and Costco's for every championship, they had us. They took our content for the book, right? So it's the Nuggets championship book that is sold nationwide as a DNVR book written by Harrison Wind and our other beat writers. And we had and at that time, one of our early co-founders of DNVR, actually, who came in later, but he's one of the original kind of DNVR partners, Adam Morris. He was on Stratechery, which is a big tech podcast. And we got a bunch of inbound interest. Sam Landman ends up sending me a DM on LinkedIn because I had talked to...
And who is Sam?
So Sam Landman is at Mosaic, which is the fund of Andre Iguodala, ex-Nugget and ex-Warrior and Philadelphia 76er. And I had talked to his partner, Richard Smith, probably a year prior. So we were on their radar. And when all this stuff happened and he heard the pod and he had seen everything, he kind of DM'd me and said, hey, let's chat. And at this time, we were really kind of like, we were about to launch Philadelphia, which is the city he was in. There was all this kind of, you know how it is. We knew a bunch of the same people, and the deal was just felt really warm. And they came in and said, "Hey, we'll do, 4 million, 4.5, whatever it was on on your Series A, priced at, I think, well, whatever the price was." Same round. And that's when your everybody's safes converted when they did the deal. And we went and opened Philadelphia in late 23. And that was, Philadelphia just is a year old as of September. And that's our biggest opening year ever for a market. They performed the best in all areas other than video, but they have the subscriber record and audio record and everything. So
for first year, not overall though.
Yeah, not overall. They actually have the record for most subs in a month.
Okay.
In their first year. So now we hired a bunch of the athletic reporters there.
Yep.
So that was really beneficial. But yeah, it's a good market. So we kind of got through that, and then coming into 24. So what's funny is that how they always say you're raising your next round during,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you really are.
You absolutely are. And you're always raising.
Yeah, you're always raising. So
I was with one of the other portfolio companies we were part of, and the CEO was trying to explain to me, like, "Oh, we're almost through with this next fundraiser. They weren't even started yet. We're almost through, and then we'll be able to take a couple years off. So I don't really need to fill this position to lead fundraising." I'm like, "Dude, you're going to be fundraising for as long as you're in that seat, and if you're not, you got a big problem, because it's not going to be that you don't need money." And sure enough, a year later, he's come to that realization.
Yeah, yeah.
Another problem with us entrepreneurs, for the audience, and I was as guilty as any, is you always think you know a lot more than you really know, and that whatever other people did before you, that was their thing, but your thing is different. And a lot of us entrepreneurs just have to learn the hard way. It's just part of the journey.
I totally agree with that. So what's funny is, Tegna, I actually skipped this, but during that time in 21 where we could go to Techstars or we could go to DraftKings, there was actually a handful of companies that were inquiring about acquiring us. I think there's this time right before scale where you're acquirable at a cheap price, and people think if we can get this now and they can scale under us, we're going to save ourselves a ton of money and we're going to own the whole thing, right? And so we had kind of seen that.
Which usually doesn't work, by the way.
Yeah. I don't think it would have worked, because there were so many things we had to learn for it to work now that I don't think it would have worked under a corporate structure, especially with a public company. But
so you mentioned Tegna, and they're going to come up more in this story. So
I was about to mention
let's
them.
now talk about who Tegna is.
Okay.
Before you include them in the table. So who is Tegna, and
so
why
you
they
have
matter?
this public broadcast company, Tegna. They own the second largest. They have the second largest hold of local audiences in America on television, local television, right? So in Denver, they own Channel 9, right? Which is it's our biggest news channel. I hear they own the ABC affiliate in Dallas. That's the biggest news station in Dallas. So they have these, and now it's local.
It's TV,
it's television.
Assets. Yep. What other kind of assets?
That's their big play. They also have free ad-supported television in these markets as well. But that's their big play. That's what they're known publicly for. Now, they do have a digital arm that does some really creative things. It's led by a guy named Adam Ostro. And so they own Locked On, which is like a team-specific, creator-driven podcast network. They acquired a newsletter company called 6 a.m., which does these beautiful local newsletters. They're really into local though.
And they're public company. How big?
I think about $2 billion. So
big, good sized pub company owns
big enough to
TV stations across the U.S. Are they purely U.S.?
Yeah, purely U.S. So what happened was Adam Ostro, who is the chief digital officer, he kind of comes to me in that same time and starts talking about potentially acquiring us. Nothing ever really came to fruition. What's funny is that later after we launched Phoenix and we're in between, I think, the Chicago and Philly launch, I go back to him as we're seeing, I try to hire him. And he's like, I'm working on this stuff. Sinclair is about to acquire us. I don't know if they do. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe it's, I don't know, but I got to focus on this. Now, for 2 years, they were in diligence about to be acquired by Sinclair. Sinclair is the biggest broadcast company. They're the biggest one in America, right? So,
does Sinclair go beyond TV?
It's all television, but they own RSNs. They owned Bally's actually. So they own RSNs, local television stations in every market, huge footprint. They were going to acquire Tegna, which of course, we know what the kind of political climate's been like the last couple of years. They were not going to let those companies merge or have one acquire the other. And so what happens is Tegna finally says we're out, and I'm speaking for Tegna now, but at some point Tegna's out, and they have been in diligence for 2 years, not spending money. And so they have all this capital. So Adam literally texts me, I'm on my way to Philly to meet with Sam. We're doing this deal with Mosaic. And he says, hey, essentially money's burning a hole in my pocket. Let's do a deal. And I'm like, dude, I'm about to close this A. I can't. So I fly in, I still meet with him. We're starting. So I'm literally closing the A. We're start building the B. And so we close that. I go on vacation in Mexico in December with my family, and I'm meeting, and we do our first call with Tegna. And it kind of rolls slow. They were in the middle of acquiring 6 a.m. at the time. So hey, we got to get this done. And so I would say by the end of spring, they flew out, we had met. All the numbers looked good based on how we were growing. And they said, hey, we'd like to lead a B on this. And so, what would that take? And, at the time, I think we were thinking, 8 to 10 million would probably be, based on the valuation we were looking at there, would probably work. And we ended up raising 12, and that was, we closed that in August, I want to say August, September, something like that.
Good up round too.
Yeah. Good up round. Yeah. I think everybody, I think we did 5X on valuation from the prior round, something like that. Or 2X on valuation from the prior round. That'd be big, right?
Yeah. I'm like, if we did 5X, we did the math wrong.
Yeah. Dan's ready to cash out now. 2X from the prior valuation. So yeah, it was good. And then we went and opened Dallas. And so that's where we're at now. It's we just opened Dallas. We got to try to determine whether we're not going to open whether or not we're going to open marketing Q1. We've built out a pretty big.
Well, tell us about the Dallas launch.
Yeah, Dallas was big. It's our first sports network where there is not a legal sports betting in the market.
But there will be.
No? Yeah, there will be. Yeah. What's interesting is that we used to think that this model was based around sportsbook revenue. At some point, sportsbook revenue started winding down, and where it used to take 18 months to kind of get a DraftKings or FanDuel to feel like a market was mature or saturated, that got down to 12, and then it got to 9, and now it gets down to 3 to 6 for a new market, because they not only have new markets launched so many around the country, but the brand names are so out there that as soon as a city or as soon as a state legalizes it, there's pretty much a 90-day grab to get the signups you want, and then you're out. You're not educating users anymore, and so they still have to spend money in the market, but not at the rate that they used to spend. We're just these insane CPMs spending a ton of money. And so, we had to build during this whole time. I'm just talking about scaling and building and raising money. We've had to build a real business in this time. I remember coming into 2023, February of 2023, we're working this big deal with DraftKings. They're going to buy all current and future markets. We're going to do this big deal with them. And I was excited about it. Thought we were close. Again, another big deal with DraftKings. It was close. And they decide to change their investment strategy. And they come back to us with a really small spend and say, hey, we're not going to actually really do anything. And we had just hired a VP of revenue at the time, John Riskin. And we're building out his numbers. This is what you should expect. This is what you already, and that's gone. And now the thing is you're 30 days in, welcome to the team. Like you have to build a whole new book of business here. You know?
Do you stick with it?
Absolutely. It's just an amazing grinder. And so, yeah, I mean, we really started in that February of 23, we were down from February of 22. It's the first time, and this isn't, this is every startup should have this, but it was the first time we ever had a down month in company history, especially year over year, right? Because you should always just kind of, at this stage, you're kind of have this going, right? So it was a big wake up sign. And, John's team recorded 11 months consecutive revenue growth to where we ended up with a record December revenue number. We kept setting records once we got to, I think, Q3. And we ended up with a decent year, and then that's when we came into 24 and we're able to kind of do the B with Tegna and stuff like that. But yeah, we're really, I can tell you that from a diversification standpoint, we went from, at one point, our business was 72% of the revenue was sportsbook, and now it's less than 15, so it's still a good chunk, but it's just, it doesn't make the business,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how's it been with Tegna as a partner? Your honeymoon period itself?
Yeah, it's pretty good. They're really great people. I think that the one thing we've found is that, there's a really good, and I kind of knew this going in, but there's a good digital group in there. Sometimes you're a little worried you get with the old guys, the old media, but this is really a new media group inside of the old media. And they've been really helpful. Some of the stuff still needs to, we haven't ran our ads yet in the local markets, which that's coming soon. But we have some good partnerships in place. Our people are being featured on their stations, which is a part of the deal. There's a commercial deal involved in this, or included in this, that's strategic for us. And so, yeah, they've been really good. We just had our first board meeting with them. I thought they were excellent. Had a follow-up call, really, thought-provoking. So, and I like that. For me, I think out of the board meeting, my thing is like this. It's like, I don't want you to just come on and sign off on every idea I have and just say it's great when it's not. I also don't want you to be a dick the whole time and, and shut everything down. What I want is let's have some really clear, unbiased, thought-provoking discussion about something. And then if you think something should be done differently, you should offer some reasons, some strategies of how we can do it differently, maybe a referral to someone who's had this problem in the past, something like that, And so I think right now we have a group, and Tegna is one of them that is really kind of, they're really supportive, but they're also honest, and they're also there to kind of fight after the board meeting. A lot of times what happens at the board meeting is you kind of get this feedback, and then you go back, and then, hey, you got to go fix it. What's really good, I think, sometimes is those follow-ups, and it says, hey, this was something we talked about. Here's something I saw. Here's something we can do. Here's someone I met, here's an intro to whatever. And you're kind of battling together after the thing. So it's a good group right now.
Yeah. Cause what's needed from an entrepreneurial leader in a situation like this is one, you can't just go with what your new, particularly strategic investor wants you to do.
Right.
And people will make their mistakes. Like, well, they run a big business. They must know, or I kind of feel beholden to them. And so if they say, go do this, I'm going to go do that. And then they say, go do this other thing. I'm going to go do the other thing. And then if it's not working, they're like looking at you and say, you're screwing up the business. You're like, no, I'm kind of was doing what you said you wanted me to do. So when I see, people behave that way, I'm like, just because they directed you a certain direction doesn't let you off the hook if things don't go well. So you have to find that right balance between you are the leader. You're going to do things at times that they think you should do something different, and they need to be okay with that, and you need to be strong enough to do that. But you also need to listen enough to what's being said and where they can be helpful, and how to maybe incorporate that into your thought process on what to do. And the great outcomes, the great CEOs, they have the instincts inside of them to guide what they really need to be successful. And hey, you're going to try things that aren't going to work, then you're going to pivot. So yeah, you got to find that right balance. I'm sure you are, but it's they do too. They do too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that it's really about we know exactly where we need to go and, the numbers we need to hit and what that looks like. The problem is that it doesn't always go your way. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where you need the help, is saying, hey, is there a way that is there a partnership that can be had that helps get us to this point? Is there something, what's the outside? Is there some sort of structure? If you have these 5 buckets that are, that generate revenue for you, is there one that's costing more than these others, and you can restructure the way this works somehow? So I think you want just some strategic thinkers around you, and then, support's
and relationships
obviously helpful. Yeah, totally.
So what is, when you think about your competitive rivals, do you think about them in terms of the markets that you're in, or do you think about others who are doing what you're doing but are focused on different geographies?
Yeah, for us, I think that we really look at sports talk radio and the RSNs in the market, and not necessarily as competitors at face value, saying like we're competing with them. But at the end of the day, we are going after the same capital that they're going after inside of the marketplace. And so because of that, there is a competitive component to it. Believe it or not, the other digital companies, whether those are podcast networks or blogs or YouTube channels or whatever, we're very friendly with them. The digital marketplace is very different than the traditional marketplace. In digital, everyone can kind of coexist and share each other's users and sponsors. And it's kind of this thing. And, we have really good relationships with the other digital companies out there in sports. Whereas,
and there's probably the opportunity to interact
totally
as part of the content. They want to see how
absolutely
this personality, that personality, if they're side by side and we're expressing views together,
come on each other's 100%. Yeah. Help go on each other's platforms, all kinds of stuff. The RSNs and the sports talk stations, these markets are extremely competitive. Here in Denver, we obviously had a really public dispute with Bonneville about them launching a digital brand that we felt looked similar. And I can't speak too much to that, but that was an ordeal that we were happy with the way that ended, I can say. And then in Philadelphia, we took Anthony Gargano, who's the big name out in Philadelphia, from Beasley's station out there. They sued the hell out of us. That's an understatement. I learned a lot from that. Not only did it slow down the early market growth that we had anticipated, but it was costly, and it was a big
Did it get resolved?
Oh, it got resolved. Yeah. It got resolved, and we came out with Anthony, and that network's great. So, but whatever. But yeah, we'll definitely go a different route next time we talk to somebody under contract, probably. And then, we have even as small as like the station in Phoenix, that is, we had tailgates at the local, one of the sports books there. I want to say it was FanDuel. I'm not sure, but we were going to do a live show at their facility and a tailgate by their facility. It happened to be on the grounds of the Cardinal Stadium. The local radio station there has the rights to broadcast on those grounds. So they called them and said, hey, PHNX can't do that over at the sports book over there. It blocked us from that. So there's a ton of stuff like that. I mean, in Dallas, we were trying to set up a booth and contribute to a fundraiser for, I think it was challenged children or something like that, or and like the local radio, one of the local radio stations out there blocked us from being a part of the fundraiser for children. So it's the radio stations are crazy when it comes to competition. They try to block everything out.
Yep.
So we can definitely feel the heat for sure there. Some of it is like, we're just looking to come in and add to the community. And we tell our people this, hey, like, no beef in the marketplace, no on social media ripping on the guy. No, like, we are here. We can't say we're here to add culture and community to sports in your city and then start tearing down the station that's been here for 30 years. We're like, that's not going to cut it. So we want to come in. We don't want to be divisive. Our slogan is to make it more fun to be a sports fan. We try to have as much fun with it as we can. But the sports talk stations see us as like the Grim Reaper kind of knocking on their door.
Yeah.
So.
So we're sitting here in Boulder, Colorado. And so we don't have any professional sports teams in Boulder. We're close to Denver, but do you do anything here in Boulder that might be interesting?
Well, we have the biggest buffalo show in the world. No understatement. I mean, it's massive. We actually have a tour bus that's traveling.
So Buffalo meaning CU Buffs.
CU Buffs, yep.
University of Colorado,
That's right.
Boulder,
yep.
CU Buffs team.
We have a huge CU Buff alum group working at DNVR. My wife's a CSU Ram, though. I actually got married on the CSU field.
Oh, really?
But yeah, grew up a Buff fan my whole life. But so yeah, we have a big Buff show. They're actually on. We have a bus that is completely wrapped. That's traveling with the Buffs from game to game around the country, and they do the shows. And Coach Prime has been on the bus, and
All right.
and so yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
So what's the effect of Coach Prime here on CU Buffs? Most of us who live here know that.
It's insane. It's insane. I mean, I'm fairly sure my daughter's tuition would not be as much if he was here. That's one of the things. She goes to CU. She's a freshman.
What school is she in? What's she studying?
She is majoring in strategic communications and a minor in business.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm glad I got that. I was worried I wasn't going to nail. I wasn't going to.
We almost have to do another edit.
I know. So yeah, but I think that it's been really impactful. I mean, first off, one of the things I'll say is like our events are much more diverse than they were before. That's one thing we've noticed. And I also noticed that the excitement at the games and the excitement around the community is just tenfold what it was before. The interest from an advertising standpoint, the interest around Boulder, I think, has increased dramatically. So I think that he has brought something very, very positive to the city and to the school. I think it's been pretty impactful.
And I think to the college sports dynamic overall, I mean,
Totally.
you couldn't have done what he did. I mean, before it was all about having a program that was repeatable every year and you're always in the top 20 and, it was a pretty close-knit group. Now it's, hey, there's opportunity to be entrepreneurial right there in college sports. So what other college teams do you cover in other markets?
Yeah, so we cover the Arizona State. We cover the Arizona State Sun Devils. We cover the Arizona Wildcats. We cover the CSU Rams. We cover, I think that's it. We don't cover any colleges. We have a Big Ten show, but we don't cover colleges in Chicago. It's not a big college town. We don't cover any colleges in Philadelphia because there's a bunch of them. They're kind of smaller. And Penn State is closer to Pittsburgh. I think if we launch Pittsburgh, we'll do a Penn State All-City Penn State show. In Texas, we were going to launch a Longhorns network in Dallas. It was late to the gun. It was one of the things that's probably one of my bluffs this year that I just didn't get a deal done on. We were going to acquire a network and not launch our own beat, and I didn't get the deal done in time. By the time it launched, it was too late to put a show together. And so we decided to launch without it. And that's something that I've learned. In the past, I would have forced a show through there. It would have been the wrong people. I would have said, well, we just need one. But now you see the kind of older me say, hey, we'll get this next year. And, the Longhorns are great right now. And they're a top, 3 team, number 1, whatever. And, it hurts to see, but I know that hey, you know what? Like that.
You have another bite of the apple.
I have another bite of the apple. I didn't get that one done. We got to do it right. So
yeah. So with the markets that you're in, what have you learned about what makes for markets that are ideal for what you're doing versus market characteristics that maybe aren't as ideal?
Yeah, first off, I do think that almost any sports market can be successful. It just comes down to the potential of the market, and you have to kind of understand that and then base your spend around that, right? So, for example, you could go into Indianapolis, which only has a couple pro teams. That's probably a smaller spend. You could get it to, or let's say Kansas City. I love Kansas City as a market, right? Royals and Chiefs, that's all they have. There's a couple college teams. Lower spend, you probably get to cash flow positive right away, very fast. The ceiling's probably low on it, so it's not one that's going to put, $4, $5, $6, $7 million a year into your. But if it does 2.2 and it costs you 800K at maturity, then that's one of these little small nodes that you have. And you're going to have some of those. I think early on where we're at, it's important to go and tackle big markets and try to get discovery as far and wide as you can, and try to get these ones that are going to have, if a market's going to take 5 to however many years to get to full maturity, the earlier you open it, the earlier you get to unlock those on your path, So if you think that in year 5, this thing can do 12 million, well, start now, because 5 is going to come quick, Anyway, so to answer your question though, we like big markets. I like high engagement in sports. You can tell that through ratings, traditional media. You can see that through podcast rankings. You can see what's the digital climate look like for sports in here? How many pods per team? How many reviews are there? Now Spotify has unlocked some more reporting that we can see there. How many YouTube channels? How many creators are in the marketplace? There's all kinds of things. And then inside of that, you can kind of look and say like, what's attendance like? What is the kind of entrenched fan base there? For example, in the Midwest or in the Northeast, these people are locked inside for 6 months a year. They're watching sports all the time. We love that, right? California, it's tough, right? People say, when are you going to open LA? I don't know if we're ever going to open LA. I saw the Rams Super Bowl parade. It looked like a high school state championship parade, So I don't know how exciting people are going to be about 24-hour sports in LA, right? Unless that's your national thing and you've got your ESPN and you're doing Lakers, whatever. But we love those markets like that, that are kind of, and then, I think what's the tradition for sports there? In Phoenix, we learned after we launched that the average age of the citizen in Phoenix is older than the average age of any of the teams that are there. So essentially, the natives that have lived there, when they were born, those teams weren't there when they were born there. Yeah. And that's why there's so many Cubs fans in Phoenix, which I don't know if you know this, but you probably do as a Chicago guy. Phoenix is like Chicago too. It's like summer Chicago. Yes. Right. They have a Wienersville there. They've got Los Dos. They have Los Dos. They have Wrigleyville. They've got
Aurelio's Pizza, which I grew up on.
They got Los Dos Patrios there.
Yeah.
Not Los Dos Patrios. That's Denver. What's the I'm mixing I travel too much. Portillo's. Yeah.
They got Portillo's down there.
Portillo's. Los Dos Patrios. We have that in Denver. It's a good one. They have Portillo's there. Yeah.
Which is part of the model. So you cover Chicago and people in Phoenix who are Cubs fans.
We're the home of the displaced fans.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. We're actually better for the displaced fan because they don't have access to radio and RSNs.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want your Bears show right after, if you want your Bears post-game show and you want it to just be Bears, you don't want
I would just like it to be a positive one as opposed to like what stupid thing happens in a game for them to lose again.
Which is tough to do.
Although at least we're Bears. Like getting close to winning games, which hasn't been the So how big do you think you could make this business? Is this something that could be? Is this going to be a niche?
Well, we think we're building America's next major sports network. I think we can do 30 markets at least. Those are American markets. I'm really excited about the idea of, I'm not doing this, and for any shareholders listening, I'm not spending our money here, but I love the idea of London. At some point, Adam from The Athletic has got me super excited about that, telling me how gangbusters their London launch was. I'm starting to get itchy about that. Maybe in a couple of years, we'll explore that. But listen, I think anywhere where fans are excited about sports and they want something that interacts with them the way that kind of we do, that is now, if something happens in sports in one of the cities we're in right now as we speak, our guys will be live 2 minutes from now, wherever they're at, and from wherever they're at, and they'll be, emergency podcast, live on YouTube, live on TV, boom, and so Love that, and we want to get better. Obviously, membership is a huge area for us right there. So we're trying to grow that. Adam's been really helpful with that.
And what do members get if they become subscribers?
Yep. So members, think of it like a Prime membership, right? So you kind of get brought into the system. So you become a diehard member. You get to pick out a t-shirt. You get access to all premium written content. You get 20% off merchandise moving forward. You get 20% off of events moving forward. There is exclusive diehard only membership. And you get access to the Discord lounge in your city.
Great. Let's see. Colorado, Denver, is not known as the media capital of the world. Although I got to tell you, there are a few other media examples come up. I mean, first we have Liberty Media headquartered here.
I mean, what do we got to say? Liberty. We're talking Liberty Media. Liberty Global's here too.
Liberty Global's here too. In fact, I think Mike Freeze, after he hears this, come on,
it's not exactly a media status. Is John Malone? Is that not big enough for you?
Is that not big enough? And then we have a couple other companies who are doing really interesting things in the media category. We have Outside, Robin was already a guest on here. A new media category.
They're on. I just saw their badge on Samsung Plus, their fast channel. Yep. I watched Outside last night.
Great. You guys should definitely get together. I should, if you're interested, connect you guys. And then we have the number one online gaming studio for the Apple Arcade Game of the Year right here in Boulder, which is Sunblink, Julian Ferrier. So there is room for content in this town in a pretty significant way. And we like to think of ourselves as as being really strong in certain categories around new businesses. Some of them are deeper tech, like space tech and quantum, huge digital infrastructure presence. Both companies like I was involved with, Level 3 and Zayo, but the whole wave of them right now, including spin-offs from ours. But I think media, is starting to get some traction here as well in the startup scene. And I think there's so much media heritage here with cable TV and the Liberty stuff that, boy, we might be able to unleash that in a pretty big way.
I would love that. I can tell you that it was really tough. It's been tough to raise in Colorado, and we really haven't. And not to go anti-Colorado. Colorado is flourishing in the venture space, and there's a lot of great opportunities. It's a great place to build a business. For media, it was really tough. Outside of you and Natty and, some angels that, Kim Carver from Altitude and some other people that just kind of, wrote personal checks. I mean, it was really tough to get funds excited about, ALLCITY, or at the time BSN. And so, I would love to see a place where it's not so foreign.
I'm just saying whether I really want to do this and I forgot the energy to do it, but there's a lot of ultra high net worth capital here in Colorado, but it hasn't been put to work on supporting Colorado tech companies because most of it has come from energy or real estate or railroads or traditional kind of hardcore industries. But there's these, or the people have moved here. So when they invest in tech, they just invest in funds that are typically West Coast, East Coast funds. But one of the programs we're looking to undertake perhaps is how do we help them do what I think they naturally want to do? They want to make good investments, but they'd like to invest in Colorado if there's a way to invest well in Colorado tech. So whether it's through being more active in the funds like Matchstick and many others, or be part of kind of a direct investment strategy, we'd love to see more of that capital that's already on the ground here be put to work here on supporting Colorado companies that are scaling up into something of significance.
Yeah, that's really important. Having to leave the market to get capital every time is such a grind.
Yeah.
Such a grind. So, and I know where I've spent a lot of days in New York, a lot of time in New York raising media money. Yeah. So, or Philadelphia.
So what would your next round look like with a strategic leading the last round? Does that constrain your flexibility on what you would do next from a fundraise?
It depends. There's some timing, there's approvals based on timing there. I think that,
like a certain amount of time has to elapse.
well, so, not to get too far into the weeds, but there is a time period there where we need approval to raise, which there've been great partners. I think the biggest thing there is just, that we're not going to be able to raise from a competitor, so to just kind of, I guess, let everyone behind the curtain on this, which is fine, right? I mean, because we have the reason why is because we have a 2-year commercial relationship in this. So they have to make sure that we're not going to go out and do a deal with Sinclair
Sure.
while we have this which makes a ton of sense. But I don't think they would block us from raising any capital outside of that. I actually think that we have a good idea probably who the next fund is, who would lead our C. And I think that, my hunch that the next round is probably, a $25-30 million round, something like that. I think that it would want to be enough to where we could get to the majority of that scale without, I think like it would be enough to where it's almost the last one, so to speak, unless like we held on way past acquisition opportunities and either we're looking at potential IPO or said, hey, we're going to do $100 million D because we're going to whatever, and who knows?
Because you're going to take over the biggest sports of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, how do you do in football, soccer? Do you cover any teams
we
today?
cover MLS. It's slow and it's, some of it's good. The Rapids here are good for us. And the fans are diehard. There's just not a lot of them, but yeah, I mean, English Premier is that's where the audience is at for soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great.
But yeah, no, I listen, I think that, there's a lot of potentials, out there, but I think like a bigger fund that's not kind of scared of media and lifestyle, right? There's a lot of components to our business. Most people don't realize that. So, a lot of funds that have a really strict thesis, we will almost just fall out of immediately because of how diverse the product portfolio is, right? So we have we're obviously digital media, and we have a big direct ad sales business, a big programmatic ad sales business. We've got a membership/subscription business. We've got a merchandise business. We've got an events business, right? So if you're somebody,
I think that all fits under the banner of a media company.
It does. It does.
And it's nice that the media company has multiple ways of interacting with their customers.
I don't think you can build media without that stuff.
No, I mean, outside's the same way. I mean, they have all those elements because that's what it takes to really have. I mean, you have a very intimate relationship with your customers.
Yep.
I mean, extremely intimate relationship with your customers. So you're serving them, you're providing them a full plate of what they might want, including helping advertisers reach those customers. So it doesn't sound like anything you're doing is outside of that focus on, hey, we want to own the sports relationship with our diehard users.
Yep.
And we want to serve them to the fullest extent possible. And I think it opens up a lot of opportunities over time. One thing that's not going away is fans of sports teams.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's and that's one of the craziest things right now is that there's an elevation in all metrics, whether it is viewing audience, whether it is attendance in games, whether it's watch time on social media, whatever everything is through here. So that's our whole thing. So if everything is here, but then local coverage is kind of going down here, then it's like, okay, well, somebody has to fill in the gap. And so right now we're kind of running unopposed in that area. So knock on wood.
And is AI presenting any opportunities to you yet? That's more than just around the edges.
It hasn't quite yet. I mean, from a data side, there's some things we've been able to build for tracking and reporting that's pretty incredible from AI. Nothing that the people watching probably, well, maybe this audience would, but we were actually ChatGPT was able to build us a response mechanism that essentially can, once a show is posted, it can automatically grab its link, put it in a doc, and then 24 hours later record how many views it has. So it's doing the reporting. Normally that would be an account manager would manually have to do all of this work. And that's how you would be able to, if an ad sponsor said, hey, I want to see my ad that ran on Thursday, November 8th, and I want to know how many people saw it. Dan, a little account manager, would have to go find that, and hopefully you put it in an Excel sheet somewhere. AI does that for us now. So there's things like that. On the front end of media, not really, because I think our brand is like so authentic that it's hard to kind of find where media or where AI works in that world.
Yeah. I suspect you're going to find something in the category of how to enhance the content.
I'm sure we will.
Enhance the content, enhance the user experience. There's got to be, AI's got to be chopped at the bit to want to make your content more interesting. The one I'm thinking of is
editorial. It's the one place we don't want to spend a lot. And so would love a world where, we figure out how a story is filed and an AI editor just goes in. The problem there is that we've looked into that is that they need to know the context of the now sport that just happened. And because AI is not watching the game, they don't have context. And so they can edit it like a teacher would edit something, but they don't know the context. So it makes it tough to be a real sports editor. But, like everything, I think we'll get closer and closer. That stuff will be solved.
Yeah, for certain. Anything we haven't touched on, like we didn't really talk about what you were doing much earlier before you even stumbled upon this. Maybe a few minutes on that, so that
I've been a media guy forever. I started in the mid 2000s. My first real gig was I was a featured columnist for Bleacher Report.
Okay,
that was before they had scaled it up and sold it. And so I got to kind of see how they were doing that. And it was cool. You worked with a local editor and they had all these people and they were just, distributing a bunch of content. That was before the team app or any of that stuff they had. So I did that and I wrote for a couple sites, and then I got an opportunity to be on radio, and I got into brokered radio, which is like, you pay for your own time. They give you the commercial inventory and they say, hey, you get your own show. But the show costs you $1,000 a month. You get all the commercial inventory. Whatever you make over that is yours.
Yeah.
And so I essentially was brought into brokered radio. I had some really good people around me that kind of knew the business that I learned from. And I've always been kind of.
Did you cover your $1,000 a month?
Yeah. Well, a couple. Yeah, at the beginning it was probably tough. But I guess one of the things that I've always been really strong at is retaining information and learning quickly. And so, I figured that out pretty quickly. And then I would say within 3 years, I started buying and looking for other assets that I could buy and sell. And to where when I launched BSN Denver, the website, I had 2 radio shows. I had commercial inventory on a streaming product on denverpost.com. We're very early to have that. Had commercial spots in 2 television programs, print. So I had all this stuff. That was when I so I had a big suite of local brands that were advertising with me, and some of it I was hosting. I would have hosts on others. All different setups, but it was all product acquisition and monetizing media, and it was all local based. And so, a lot of times we look for like, I guess you could say that this is like a product founder fit company. Right. So it's like, this was a product that I kind of spun up based on my skill set and what I saw.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah. And still to this day, there's no digital companies that go to market locally and compete for local ad dollars, that are just on YouTube, right? Like that's not a thing. Still to this day, not a thing. So the fact that we're showing up locally and hitting the pavement, selling podcasts and YouTube is, it's different. It's different.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of times startups are led by technology. I know a technology and I'm going to go build a business because I know the technology, but it's people know the product market fit where they understand enough about the technology that they're at the cutting edge of what is doable. So they are applying kind of the edge of technology, but what they're applying it to is them knowing and loving kind of a market that they want to serve, they want to create. They have something in their head to bring forward. And this is probably as good an example of that as any I know.
Yeah.
Maybe outside is as well. But, you're building a service that you wanted to be out there, and by willpower and creativity, you've made a ton of progress.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
congratulations on everything you've done so far. It's
Thank you.
fun to be a part of the journey. And I've seen you overcome a few obstacles along the way. And now you're in a really strong position, and can't wait to see what you do with this.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the support. Thanks for having me on today. This is great. This is a great setup. Nice house too.
Not too shabby. See what happens when you when you get a little lucky here and there.
Yeah, I just need an IPO and I'll get one of these.
Yeah, all right. Good deal.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Roars. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe on your listening platform. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Courtney Caruso with support from Kendall Weinberg, Emily Reed, and Gibson Siegert.